Well, I think we're ready to get started. So I'm joined by the industry experts today for a very special conversation about the state of e-commerce in 2025. And if you've been keeping up with how fast the e-commerce space has been moving lately, you know that there's a lot to talk about, and we'll be covering some very spicy topics. And we want to hear from you. So before we get started, a quick housekeeping item. We'll be opening up the floor to all of you for Q&A at the end. So use the Q&A feature to submit your questions, and we'll make sure to cover all of them at the end of the call. And we'll also be launching a few poll questions throughout the conversation. So definitely be on the lookout for that. We want to hear from you. We want to know what topics are exciting for you and what you want to hear more of. So definitely let us know. And with that, I think I want to start introducing this conversation. So I feel like the state of e-commerce is moving at the state of or at the speed of AI lately. Everyone's either talking about agents or tariffs, both equally hot topics that we're going to dig into today. So I'm Alina Weinstein. I'm a product marketer here at Vercel, and I spend a lot of time thinking about e-commerce. So I'm very excited to be joined by the industry experts Mokshika Sharma and Vince Koh. So I'd love it if you both could say a few words introducing yourselves. So Mokshika, why don't you go first?
Hello, everyone. I'm Mokshika. I was most recently the head of product and technology at Sur La Table, where we spent about 5 years doing all sorts of digital transformation. And I've spent the last 15 years working across machine learning, data, org design, and most importantly, understanding consumer behavior. I'm very excited for this conversation because as technologists think we're not just builders, but we're also advisors to our organizations. And with so much changing in this space, it's really a great time to dig into what's next. So, yeah, thank you for inviting us, Lena.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vince Koh, Global Head of Digital Commerce at AWS. Thanks so much for having me today. So I've been with Amazon just over 4 years now, based in New York. My focus is really helping enterprise retail and consumer brands navigate the quickly changing digital commerce landscape. And I work with the companies to identify use cases and come up with the right solutions, whether from AWS or our partner network that sort of align with the changing customer expectations across all channels and touch points. Part of what makes my role interesting is also collaborating with the other Amazon teams like advertising, fulfillment, and retail to explore how we might bring additional Amazon's innovations or capabilities to AWS customers to or inspire new approaches. So yeah, really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you both for being here. You're the perfect people to have this conversation with. So I'm just going to jump straight into a pretty spicy question, or just what's on top of everybody's minds right now. So Vince, what is agentic commerce?
Yeah, I think agentic commerce is, fundamentally about AI systems that can act autonomously on behalf of customers, right? Not just providing recommendations, but actually making decisions and taking actions. So we're seeing AI that can research products, compare options across different brands, or even execute purchases based on the learned preferences, right? So what excites me is how this sort of changes the entire customer relationship. Instead of customers navigating very much of complex catalogs with so many different products and checkout processes, the intelligent AI agents become more of a trusted advisor that understand your preference, budgets, or timing. So I think, uh, it's a commerce that sort of works for customer rather than requiring the customer to work for it. So it could be gift shopping online or planning for your next family vacation or many other things. So I think what's powerful is that unlike simple automations, these agents really adapt and learn from your preferences over time and becoming increasingly valuable I don't know, partners, advisors, or assistant, whatever you want to call them, in your shopping journey.
And do you think that the age of AI agents for e-commerce is here? Like, how are you thinking about both consumers relying on AI agents to purchase online, and then also how are you advising brands to think about their agentic strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're in the early stages of the AI agent era for commerce. So what's fascinating is how fast this space is evolving. I think we see new announcement, new partnership almost every week, right? So the technology is maturing rapidly, and we're starting to see real adoption in several key areas. So most immediate use case I can think of, and we're seeing, is research and decision support, right? So AI platforms are becoming sophisticated enough to handle detailed product research, answering questions about product specifications or compatibility or use cases. So people are having actual conversations about their needs rather than just typing keywords into search boxes. We are also seeing, development in more of a routine purchase management. So technology exists for AI to handle things like subscription renewals, reorderings, essential items, and managing recurring purchases. So as these systems prove to be reliable, and I think a consumer's willingness to delegate these decisions will just keep growing from here. What's promising is that consumers often discover these agents are not just saving time, they're sometimes uncovering better options or deals than manual browsing would show, right? So we're moving from simple automation towards AI that really improves the shopping experience. So yeah, the foundation technology is here and the early adoption is happening. And what's notable is how quickly consumer comfort levels are increasing once people experience the benefit at the first hand, right? So we're still in the early stage, but the path to me looks very clear, and AI agents are becoming a meaningful part of the commerce ecosystem, not just a passing trend in my view.
And Mokshika, from the other side, from the retail space, how are you seeing this conversation pick up? Is it picking up? Are you seeing a lot of early adopters? Like, tell us from the other end on what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think it's like any other technology in this space. It's highly dependent on what the culture of the organization really is, and how much the leadership is on board, not only from just as I said, culture perspective, but also in how they are putting resources behind it. Because in some cases, it's a lot cheaper to do some of these use cases, but in some cases, it is pretty expensive, especially if you're trying to do it more molded to your brand identity, and to making sure that it's not biased in any way, or that's not for your brand, for example. So and it requires a lot of thoughtfulness as well across the board and across the organization. So the companies that are really succeeding in bringing use cases not only for the consumer interaction, but also for their organization improvements, are the ones that are thinking about it as more of a larger agent network in a way, or how they're building it on it with each other, or with different agents with each other, and how those agents are interacting with each other. As Vince said, it's still in infancy, and it's still kind of evolving based off of consumer tastes and how the threshold of the different organizations. But there's a lot of promising use cases that a lot of colleagues are trying and are so an example of this is, how does this impact merchandising? How does this impact what are the search terms that are coming in, utilizing that, bringing it over to merchandising, and then all the way at the end of, even in your cart, what else are you suggesting to add to cart, right? So that whole flow, having machine learning and AI in that flow is obviously going to make the experience a lot better, but it's how thoughtful you are in that whole experience that will elevate certain companies than others. Of course, there's an entire group of companies that are, under the sand a little bit, just waiting to see what everybody else is doing, or maybe considering it as a fad. And this was a topic I was talking to other retailers, and it is interesting to see the two different I guess ways that people are dealing with what's coming forward.
Yeah, okay, so I love that merchandising use case, but I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper. What are some of the favorite use cases that you're seeing that you'd love to start seeing more of throughout the industry?
Yeah, so the way that I kind of am seeing AI and how people are bringing it in is one-offs, so content, of course, and SEO improvements and things like that. But what I personally like to see a lot more is not just one use case, but kind of the ecosystem of how different use cases are working with each other. So an example of this, as I said, we could be looking at inventory management that's impacting pricing, that's impacting maybe some sort of personalization or creative A/B testing, and matching that with customer personas and what we know about customers. So being able to go really deep with some of these use cases because we have combined data about the customers. And so I'm thinking, for example, imagine an inventory agent flagging a low stock situation and then instantly syncing it with the merchandising agent that's pulling back, maybe some sort of promotion even, right? So that sort of adjustment on real time is something that I'd love to see more companies explore, but it only happens if they're building an ecosystem rather than just kind of thinking of it siloed one by one.
Yeah, that's a super good point. And we're definitely going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later too. But Vince, I also want to ask you the same question. So curious about your favorite use cases for AI agents that excite you the most.
Yeah, particularly excited about these more intelligent product discovery that goes beyond just the traditional recommendations, right? Instead of just people also bought this type of systems. These systems understand that the underlying reasons behind purchases and can connect the same unrelated products based on the actual use cases. Also on the B2B side, we're seeing the development of agents that transform more of a procurement from a cost center to strategic advantage, right? So these systems analyze what's going on in the market condition-wise, negotiate with suppliers and even identify alternative sourcing options during the supply chain disruptions. We're also seeing this sort of bridging that is happening between digital and physical experiences, creating much more seamless connections between online shopping, in-store experiences, and even post-purchase support. So the vision, I think, is not about replacing human interaction, but enhancing it with much more contextual intelligence that makes it every touch point of consumer journey much more valuable than before.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also I'd be really curious to understand the role that MCPs play in agentic commerce.
Yeah, so regarding MCPs, they basically enable what we call compound intelligence, where specialized agents combine their own expertise, right? And then imagine your health monitoring system noticing changes in your sleep patterns and automatically coordinating with your sort of kitchen appliances or to suggest the different sort of meal plans and that might help improve your rest, right? And there's so many different use cases. I think it's at the beginning, but I think just by talking to some of our technology experts at AWS, they seem to be super excited about the potential of MCPs. Cool.
So that brings up a good point. All of this technology and, all of these new changes, they probably warrant big technology changes to be able to take advantage of these things. So I'm curious, how have companies started to change their tech stacks to welcome these types of new innovations, and what have they been doing right?
I mean, the generally, I think if you think about how e-commerce has been evolving, right? For example, we often talk about composable commerce or headless commerce that has kind of moved from a this nice to have to much more essential infrastructure for many companies. So I think that sort of acceleration has driven by the need for very advanced things like omnichannel experiences. We all remember what happened during the COVID years, how, a lot of the companies had to scramble to figure out how to do the business. And now increasingly by, AI integration requirements, when you have AI agents that need to access product data, inventory information, and customer profiles across multiple touch points, right? Headless architecture becomes that much more crucial, right? So we're seeing retailers who invested in these modern infrastructure, now able to implement AI features much quicker in weeks rather than months compared to the ones that are not. So it's become the foundation that enables rapid experimentation with the new customer touchpoints.
Yeah, Moksha, I'd love to hear from you too. And maybe, an answer to this question too, like can you welcome agentic commerce without being headless or without having a composable strategy? Like, is it possible even?
Yeah, when I talk to other CIOs and CDOs, it's really interesting because, of course, they've been around the block and seen that headless architecture is not new, right? It's not. It's been around forever, and they've always debated the fact of whether they should go headless or not, or modular or not. And in the past, what's been the maybe concerning factor is just how much it would cost to actually support a headless architecture, and also the type of not only technical management but potentially the business management that is required for something that's a lot more modular. Now, with some of these more modern tools, that's what's changed, I think, in the last, we would say, 2 to 3 years, is really the maturity of the tools available and the ability to bring that into organizations that were typically, didn't invest in this. And so I'm seeing a lot of organizations do a giant leap in a way, right? And that's what's so fascinating about right now is because it's cheaper than ever, and it's also, the experience is actually fairly straightforward to be able to do some of these improvements. And how different parts of the organizations are working together are also much improved with these tools. So you have product engineering and design being able to really work together in a tighter collaboration for faster iteration. So to answer your question on whether or not, agentic or AI can come in, if you have it modernized, I do believe that there is a strong case that if you haven't done it in the last couple of years, you're not too far behind. Yes, you will be obviously faster if you've already kind of invested in that type of changes, but there's still so much opportunity for companies that haven't done that investment because of how quickly they can now iterate. And I think that's kind of the advantage, and hopefully a lot of technologists take that to heart. The advantage they have right now is to be able to leapfrog in a completely different way, and hopefully be able to be more thoughtful about that complexity and be cheaper in a way about that complexity too.
For companies that haven't started this process of modernization, where do you suggest they start, both from a technology standpoint and then also from like a cultural organizational standpoint?
Yeah, as a cultural goes, most of that pushback that usually happens when this type of transformation is happening is mostly not about the tech. It's usually about human. It's about the fear of disruption or lack of control sometimes, maybe process changing underneath them that they don't know is going to change. So we have to be very considerate of those very human feelings that are going to be, you have to kind of bring them along, right? And the way that I have seen the most effective change is really about making sure that you do provide clarity in what that change is going to be, being able to bring them along across the process essentially. And also I think it's not, you have to do it all at once, right? And that's the magic of composability, is that you can break really big problem into a smaller problem. So maybe you break it down into, okay, let's just focus on checkout, or let's just focus on search, right? Or maybe it's a new CMS that you want to bring in, right? And these modules that you can slowly break apart, and eventually it's kind of like ship of thesis, you kind of get a completely different thing. And I think solving for that easy business case is I think where I found more success, and proving out that we can do this. Now maybe let's try something bigger. It's about just making sure people are along in their journey and starting those conversations early on, and that's where the key really lies.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about bringing people along for the journey and having those conversations. Vince, we talked about this earlier, and I actually loved the points that you made about this, which was, being modern in a place to be able to welcome a lot of changes that are happening in the world just sets you up a little bit better for success. And we saw that play out with COVID. And the companies that were able to respond were the ones that had a little bit better preparation in terms of like how they were operating. So I'm curious if you think that the same thing is playing out with some of the changes that are happening right now with tariffs. So curious if you could speak a little bit to that and what you're seeing in the space as well.
Yeah, it's a tricky topic, obviously, but I think it's really a company by company case. Things like tariffs have really forced, I think, many of the retailers and brands to become much more um, sophisticated in their supply chain management and pricing strategies. So we are seeing, companies implement even more AI-driven sort of a dynamic sourcing that can automatically adjust supplier relationships based on these cost fluctuations, right? So, which is hard to predict. That's where I think you can get some help with automation and AI. So some retailers are using this predictive analytics to anticipate, tariff changes or pre-position inventory before some sort of major announcements. Interestingly, this economic pressure has really, in my view, accelerated the adoption of AI tools, especially for this type of internal use cases that can optimize operations and reduce cost in other areas to, maintain margins, especially for the retailers that have to operate the business with the very thin margins.
Yeah, I'd love to understand a little bit more too, like, with some of this pressure that's happened, are there some use cases that came out of what you've seen with retailers do with AI that maybe you didn't expect? Or like, can you shed some light on some other use cases that you've seen in the space too?
I think, just thinking about there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, right? And we don't know what's going to be announced minute by minute. So I think being able to sort of forecast in an intelligent way, I think that's the sort of where companies are finding value, right? AI use cases are not always about the external consumer-facing ones, but there are a ton of opportunities to make the internal operations that much more efficient and quicker decision making as well. So Those are some of the retailers are, those are some of the things that I see big leading retailers are making big bets on, and feel more comfortable executing it right away and transition from POC to into production, and then see some practical return on investment right away, rather than focusing on other things. So I think it depends on which vertical they are in and how impacted you are. Some are not, some are impacted heavily because of the disruptions that are happening, but it's that's what we're seeing, company by company, how much exposure they have with this sort of tariff situations.
Yeah, so speaking of ROI, when we think about performance and conversion rates that historically we've seen have really big impacts on e-commerce sites, I'm curious if the performance metrics that we're seeing that have a lot of success have changed or not.
I think so. So beyond the traditional metrics like page load times, or other basic ones, I think we're seeing more and more that the AI specific metrics becoming critical. So, for example, there's a context retention rate, meaning that how well the site remembers and applies the customer preferences across different sessions, which is strongly correlated with conversion. So things like personalization accuracy scores and speed of dynamic content adaptation are also becoming popular KPIs. But here, to me, I think also what's interesting is there's a metric called the intent completion rate, how effectively the site basically helps customers to accomplish their underlying goal, not just complete a purchase. So the intent metrics are set of measurements used to sort of gauge the level of interest, engagement, and intention displayed by the customer, right? So it could be by channel, campaign, audience, and even like the different creative materials that you're showing to the customer. So, but what's I think important is to correlate your intent metrics with the revenue, right? So if you cannot do that, I think the metric will become obsolete to the leadership when you're reporting to them.
Yeah, so Makshika, I'd love to hear from you on this too, because historically SEO has it well and is a very important metric for retailers, in thinking about, conversion and how their site is performing. But how does SEO change in in the age of AI?
Yeah, no, one thing that I was monitoring the last couple of years was just how Google was transitioning some of their maybe blog entries and how they were talking about what was going to be part of their equation. And a couple of years ago, they had released this whole paper about EEAT, which was essentially, making sure that the website shows experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And what that essentially translated to, at least in our reading, was that they appreciated companies that really spent time to show that they're trustworthy to the consumer, or the user, and also that they were the authority in whatever they're talking about, right? And which makes a lot of sense even as you consider what AI does, right? It's looking at context, it's looking at giving answers to people that are giving just natural language questions, right? So being able to make sure that your pages have those answers, that's how essentially they come out in, let's say, a Google web page or other search engines, and potentially even, again, no one knows for sure, but potentially even LLM chatbots, right? And so really focusing on what are the questions that a consumer could could ask about a product, right? So let's say, you are selling a Dutch oven. So potentially the maybe a logical question is, how do you clean a Dutch oven? How do you take care of a Dutch oven, right? And these things naturally, ideally, because consumers anyway is going to be looking at your page to make that decision, like, oh, maybe it's not for me because it requires too much maintenance or whatever it is, right? And or it's for me because it's going to last me forever if I take care of it this way. So those type of answers on your pages matter so much more, which is very in line with, again, as you consider what the LLMs are also potentially looking at. Now, the second part about it is, we in Google, that you do have, let's say metadata, you have certain tags that you can add. Also, you have robots.txt, relatively. And now they've in the LLM world, they've added an LLM.txt, but the question is, does it do anything, right? So we're all grappling with the same questions of how do you get to the top, but it's also, I think the layer underneath is if you answer the questions that consumers are looking for, I think you almost win on across the plate, because both when the customer comes to the page, you're doing a good job and hopefully sending them to a purchase, but also hopefully these search engines are looking for the same thing. And I think it all comes to the same point.
And in a lot of ways, I feel like all of this is so full circle too, because when we think about personalization and how that's been, a North Star for a lot of retailers for the longest time, all of this work, I think, lays the groundwork for us to be able to have this really personalized consumer experience. And so we're almost going from, personalization to hyper personalization. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about like how we've entered into that phase, especially with, AI being such a big part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting because personalization had a big moment, a couple of years ago, and in a way, it kind of got a tiny bit of bad rep, because it was everywhere in every tool and every pitch, right? And there was a bit of naiveness. Maybe that's how we see AI today, is what could it actually deliver? And there was this like idyllic dream where a customer could land on a page, it instantly knows, what they're looking for and serves them the perfect product, right? Like that's kind of the dream. And I think in reality, there was a learning on both sides where the retailer understood that customers especially want to feel understood, but not like under surveillance, if that makes sense, right? So they don't want to be, an over personalization potentially could create anxiety about, oh, is this too invasive? And so you do have this fine line. And I think what these newer tools bring is a nuance of it's and you can create cheaper and easier, meaningful, say lightweight personalized experiences, right? So and in a way the heavy lift is not tech, but rather understanding the customer personas, the context, the behavior. And so being able to provide a personalization where it becomes almost invisible is now the new dream, and I think it's more accessible, to the point where hopefully with these tools, you can get it in every customer touch point, whether it's online or in emails, customer service, or even how some of these purchasing chatbots and things like that are going to experience the brand. So hopefully that extends all the way through.
Yeah, what do you think are your favorite use cases for personalization for the retailer? I know we talk about A/B testing, but what have you seen
Yeah.
done really well in that space?
Yeah. So I know Vince noted about product recommendations, which is absolutely, I think, mind-boggling in how good things are getting now. And then also there's called like almost micro interactions that I've seen recently. For example, having, should you show a product bundle? Should you show a restock reminder? Should you show a discount, right? And those micro interactions are fascinating, especially on the like the cart or the checkout, because that can be tailored fairly easily with the type of customer that is landing on the page. And it's not invasive. It's not necessarily, in your face, but it might be an additional trigger for some persona versus the others, right? And that's where having great headless technology really helps, because you can be a lot more lightweight about those experiences then.
And when you think about personalization, is there a trade-off between some of these really amazing, rich, interactive experiences and site performance?
Oh
I'd
yeah.
like to understand like where that line is and what your advice is for companies.
Yeah, it's the push and pull of your how fast your website is and the marketing tags on top of it. And this is just a different version of it, right? I think the more you can offload that computing to the not the front end essentially, right? Like the more you can essentially predict the experience prior to the loading, the faster you'd be able to get that experience. And additionally, the good thing about headless is you can be modular about things. So you can load, let's say, 75% of your page, and then now you realize, okay, this person might also want this other. So you can be modular about how you load your first part and then your second part, right? That's the success of some of the newer platforms that are out there now, and that's really what you have to focus on. But it requires an entire strategy around it, and you can't just insert it in, because again, otherwise it'll just be like a tag that's added on, and now it's what are you optimizing for?
Yeah, exactly. Vince, I'd love to ask you the same questions, but what companies have you seen do this really well, where they're balancing, these incredibly personalized experience, and then they're also maintaining an incredibly performant site?
Yeah, I think this is where more of a edge computing and intelligent caching become critical, right? Companies are using AI to predict which experiences will drive conversion for specific users and delivering those selectively. So we are seeing, these systems that can serve more of a lightweight experiences to price-sensitive customers while providing rich, immersive experiences to high-value segments. So the key is making these decisions in real time based on the device capabilities, connection speed, and user behavior patterns. From Amazon, we obviously have to deal with lots of different events, whether it's Prime Day or Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and deal with lots of different level of spikes. So it's something that we do this. But then on the AWS side, we have customers like Mercado Libre and others that has to deal with this sort of making sure that they're balancing this trade-off. One thing I wanted to add on the previous question about personalization. There's a good example from what Amazon is doing is that, if a customer sort of regularly searches for certain items, like let's say I will always shop for like a gluten-free products, and they search for a gluten-free cereal. Now AI will intelligently position the term gluten-free within the product descriptions or title of the right products that appear in the search results, making sure that it stands out, even if Amazon or the third-party selling partner has listed that gluten-free term at the very end of the product description. So this makes it much easier for customers to quickly locate the right product based on the attribute that are most important to them, even if it's like hidden somewhere buried at the bottom of the description. And other things are interesting are like things like navigation personalization is also very popular. So customizing the menu structures and information architecture based on the individual's the shopping patterns.
I have been on a big workout kick lately, so that is pretty scary for my Amazon shopping cart because it's going to start automatically recommending a lot of dumbbells and protein powders to me, and they're just going to start showing up at my door. But I mean, I guess like how do you advise a lot of these brands to apply AI practically in some of their strategies? Like, what do you need to do to take advantage of this new wave?
My advice is to think of AI as not as a feature to add, but as a more of a new foundation for how commerce can operate. So the most successful implementation I'm seeing uh, is that more of a strategic transformation rather than technology upgrade. So, success, I think, starts with data architecture. So because AI requires very much unified, accessible, real-time customer information, right? Otherwise, it's not going to be good. So many AI initiatives struggle because the underlying data foundation cannot support the integration and processing that AI requires to be, effective. And then, secondly, I would say implement intelligent bot traffic management. We talked about SEO before, but then previously many companies actually shut off any sort of bot traffic, thinking that it's gonna be harmful for their business. That's not the case anymore. There are a lot of good quality bots that are coming from all these chat applications, right, with a good intent. So as AI search platforms scale much further, you need this sophisticated strategies for managing automated traffic to your site. So this means leveraging um, content delivery network, we call it CDN, right? So CDN technologies to classify traffic in real time and make sure these valuable AI search bots can access your content. Otherwise, your brand will be never visible in these chat applications. And third will be develop this multi-platform optimization strategy. So the SEO playbook, like we discussed earlier, is expanding beyond Google to include Perplexity, ChatGPT, Claude, Alexa Plus, Meta, you name it, and other AI platforms in other countries as well that evaluate content differently. So your technical infrastructure needs to be able to serve multiple search ecosystems, and then or say, but overall, most importantly, all organizations, I suggest to start with very much focused, measurable applications, right? Don't try to transform everything at once. Choose specific customer journeys where AI can actually deliver clear value, prove the concept, and then expand from there.
I love those three strategies, and I want to go back to the first one, which is, ultimately when you think about creating your AI strategy, at the core of it, it's actually a data problem or, a solution to figuring out, what is happening with your data. And that also goes back to what you were mentioning earlier, Mokshika, about this, cultural change and this groundswell that you have to create within your organization to really get a hold on what is happening with your data before you can start applying all of these other strategies to your e-commerce platform. So I'm curious, given that, like, how do companies practically take this on? Like, as a leader in the retail space, like, how would you initiate change here? Knowing that this is here to stay, this is coming, and we have to take advantage of, a lot of the preparation and technology that's coming right now.
Yeah, no, and I'll add a third layer to it, which is how quickly the technology is changing every single day, and the guidelines are changing every single day. So, the approach of testing and learning is incredibly important. But before anything, it's like any other transformation project. You absolutely have to all get on the same page and make sure that there is clear ownership. Just like any other technology, you need to assign teams, roles, and even how we're going to utilize this tool in and who's responsible for essentially at the end of it the metrics that this tool is going to give, right? And that I think is the one thing to consider is everybody has access to ChatGPT. And guaranteed, at least about 60 to 70% of people are using it and they're paying for it in their personal. So now the question is how much of that work product is being imported into ChatGPT without any guardrails, without any kind of understanding of potentially how dangerous that is. And so the more you can establish those ground rules at the very beginning, the better. And so now everybody's aware of how they can or can't use these tools. And then being able to iterate and try it, I think is a lot less harmful than than if you just kind of said, okay, we're not going to do anything, because there are a lot of people that are using it already, right? We all see the M dashes in our emails, we know that it's being used, right? So I think that's a big piece of it, which is the accountability and ownership, and then matching that with the test and learn. The other thing, as you noted, Vince, about the data, I often say that data is in the eye of the beholder. Like, it depends on who's reading it, right? And so it's also very important to understand how and what data we're utilizing in these models, because that in itself can inherently create biases and inherently potentially derail an entire infrastructure, right? So especially given how fluid and fill in the blanks some of these models are, you have to be very careful in what you're teaching your models. So that three-prong approach, I think, is how I would present it to my organization and how I have presented it. Also helping them understand that everybody's using it, regardless of if you if you decide you want to use it or not. That's like, it's going to happen. So good luck putting it in the can, right? So.
I love that you mentioned everybody getting on the same page about metrics. Do you have any strategies for things that you've seen being successful? Like, how do you create your own internal data dictionary for what you're measuring for intent, for example? Like, how do you define that across company?
Alina, that is the age-old question that every every retail leader will tell you. That is the hardest thing to create. I will give you an example of, let's just talk, gross profit. What is gross profit for one person over another? And making sure that, oh, are we including shipping costs? Are we including landing costs? Are we including the discounts that we're getting from brands, right? There's so many minute details that you will never actually get a cohesive, let's say, aligned dictionary. However, what you can make sure is that essentially at the how you are identifying if it's a good result versus a bad result is all aligned, right? So for example, let's say you're doing product description, there has to be a rubric, and if you can align on the rubric that gets you 80% there, then that's good, right? And I think that's the part that organizations sometimes don't want to invest in, which is okay, but also then the results are going to be that much more messier, right? So I think that's a very hard question to answer. If anyone, even in the chat, has figured it out, let me know, and we'll chat again later, because I've worked with a lot of distressed brands, and repeatedly that is something. Data dictionaries are so hard. The last thing I will say is, you don't have to reinvent the metrics wheel. You could use the same metrics that you've been thinking about years and years and years and years, right? Conversion is conversion, and so potentially you start there because you've already used it for so long and you've been identifying those metrics for so long. And then maybe you can think about how to be more creative with metrics.
Vince, same spicy question for you, but have you seen any of your the companies that you work with figure out how to do a data dictionary? And if so, can you give us some advice on this?
Yeah, it is not a it is a tough question. So we've seen the customers sort of especially the ones that have massive amount of data, right? I think if you're talking to individual vertically integrated retailers, they're in a much better shape than someone like marketplaces would have to deal with like thousands of vendors who are injecting their own sort of data, whether it's pricing or product information in the platform, right? So we've seen some very bad situation in some cases that because the marketplace didn't do a proper job to be able to clean up those data points, and they just kept growing and growing, and then later on it became a huge mess. And then it's a company by company sort of use case, but we are talking to many customers to prepare this sort of data into be a better shape and make sure what kind of architecture makes most sense for them to take advantage of translating those data, which is the data is the new oil, right? So turning that into an opportunities that is limitless with AI going forward. But yeah, it's a tough questions to answer, but something that we have to deal with many customers every day.
Cool. Well, I just looked at the calendar and we're about 6 months out from Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and that's going to be here tomorrow. So I'm curious, if you have any advice for retailers on what steps they can be taking today to get ready for Black Friday and make sure that it's smooth and seamless versus chaotic, if it is chaotic for some.
I mean, there are many things that you have to prepare for those type of events, right? How are you going to manage those traffic event, high traffic spike that happens, right? And which is very much unpredictable. And that's obviously where the beauty of cloud comes in, right? Because it's pretty much all on demand. You pay for what you use. But then we also have like a certain services available for the retailers that are planning ahead, right? And then for this type of a special events, whether it's Black Friday or special limited edition drop, when they're expecting certain like a traffic spike, they can kind of make sure they have enough of a safety blanket to make sure that they can handle those type of traffic, and then make sure they don't lose any sort of conversion opportunities. But um, I think that you have to sort of begin with more of a comprehensive audit of what could go wrong. We do have a lot of customers testing it out. Probably we're in May, but I think April, I've seen some customers already testing the Black Friday event and see if they can handle it or not. And if something is not working, then they have to make some tweaks to make sure that they have enough of sufficient power to be able to handle that type of business. So, it's those type of events that helps you to get stronger going forward. And every year, I think we're breaking record, especially on Amazon, on Prime Day or Black Friday. And every year we probably need more power to handle those type of business volume. And same situation for many of the e-commerce companies that we do business with.
Okshika, I'd love to ask you the same question, but across your peer group, for those that are doing Black Friday or have very boring Black Fridays, and I say that in the best way possible, meaning they're really doing Black Friday well. What would you say is different about those companies?
Yeah, Vince kind of hinted on it, but it's really about being proactive early. And what I mean by that is, the the teams that I've seen be successful have a ready-made toolkit going into Black Friday. And toolkits could include things like, what are the dashboards that we're looking at? What could go wrong, or what could exceed expectations, or what are some scenarios that we really want to make sure that we've tested out. And the other part, and this is almost a bit counterintuitive, but Black Friday, at least in the organizations that I've been in, and some of my peers, it's all about simplicity. And it's a lot about making sure that your pages are as up to date and simple as possible. And there have been so many times where we actually remove certain things that maybe provided conversion the rest of the year, but we'll remove it to make it faster and more simple, just to kind of remove some of the complexity of that day and Cyber Monday or that weekend, right? And that's been a incredibly great opportunity for us to also fully understand what makes our brand or what makes the company, right? And it's like, oh, why are they going to come to us on Black Friday versus maybe another company, right? And the rules do change a bit slightly. So some of the things that you're assuming will happen may be different every year to year. I think I've had a very different Black Friday every single year, and you prepare, and things inevitably go differently. But what's really been successful is being prepared for the unexpected, and being prepared to and this is where headless really has helped in many cases, that we can change things around if needed, right? And that's been really interesting. What I do find fascinating, and Vince, I'm also curious on your perspective on this, is with LLMs, there's going to be, like, at this point, there's 6 to 7%. That's what they're saying. 6 to 7% of search comes through chats. I am curious how that changes infrastructure burden,
Yeah,
as well as just how people are going to be finding you in this Black Friday versus any other Black Friday,
yeah.
because it's about to, like, there's going to be a tipping scale pretty soon, right? So
Because
just
like,
curious about that.
yeah, you cannot open it up to all bot activities, right? Because then otherwise, then in that case, your infrastructure cost will be crazy.
Yeah.
So obviously, every year we have to deal with some sort of peak capacity planning ahead of these major events. But I think, like you mentioned, I think biggest shift that we're going to see this year will be the role of AI agents in purchase planning, right?
Yeah.
So many consumers will probably delegate their Black Friday or holiday shopping to personal AI assistant that monitor prices for them, and then understand patterns and make purchase recommendations, or even make decisions for you when that optimal conditions meet, right? So I think that fundamentally changes how retailers should approach this year's major events end of the year.
Yeah.
So we're almost at our time here together, but I want to bring it back full circle to the question that we started with with the audience today, which is what is a prediction that you have for e-commerce for this year?
I think by late this year, probably I predict we'll see the emergence of AI native commerce platforms. I think the companies built from the ground up around agentic interactions rather than traditional web interfaces. So these won't be existing retailers adding AI features. They will be more of a new entrants that operate fundamentally differently. So where every customer interactions is mediated by intelligent agents, where the primary interface is basically conversational rather than visual. So, and where the entire business model is optimized for AI to AI commerce. So we're sort of already seeing the technical foundation being laid, and I think the improvement in AI reasoning capabilities combined with better integration between different AI systems is making this possible. And I think, it'll be probably the year of that the bot traffic management becomes the core competitive differentiator for many of the retailers. So companies with, like I said before, sophisticated CDN level bot classification and traffic management will be able to have significant advantage in AI search visibility and operational efficiency for sure.
Okay, so 2025 year of bot traffic management, putting it down as a prediction. Mokshika, what about for you?
Yeah, no, I agree with Vince. There's going to be rules are changing really quickly. I had a leader tell me in January that pretty quickly, probably a year, there's going to be $100 million agentic retailer, and it's going to be the fastest growing agentic retailer, and I strongly believe it. There's going to be this almost this divide almost right where consumers will be able to purchase anywhere, everywhere, all at once type of thing, and that's there's going to be that piece where consumers are going to get inundated in a lot of different areas that they weren't before. Lena, you talked about my post on about the Roblox. They partnered with Shopify as well as Fenty to be able to shop in Roblox game, which is extremely fascinating given what gaming is for. It's a very dopamine hitting situation anyways, and now you add commerce to it, and all of a sudden you've kind of added this additional potentially dopamine hit, right? And that is extremely fascinating to me, and how it relates all together is I guess what we can call it the prediction of is it's no longer about the PDP. It's no longer about, the e-commerce website, because there's too much world to play with, right? And not only physical but virtual as well now. So that's I think going to be extremely fascinating. However, I do think it's going to take a bit of a I think that the companies will build for it and will absolutely create those experiences. Will the consumers come and actually do it? I think there's still a bit to go. And but that said, my mom asked me to download ChatGPT on her phone the other day, so maybe we're almost there.
Well, it seems like we're in a whole new world or worlds with e-commerce, like you mentioned, and a lot of exciting things that are happening in the space. So, with that, I would love to thank you both for attending and being the experts and the voice of reasons and sharing your predictions with us for the state of e-commerce. This has been a really wonderful conversation. I hope we do it again. Maybe we can do this, quarterly, just to update everybody on how the $100 million agentic retailer is trending, and if we're still seeing that in the space. But again, thank you so much both for your time, and we're excited to see you both again. Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
so much, Alina. Appreciate it. Thank you, Vince.
Thank you.